I'm George VanOsterom. I live here in Georgetown, 59 King George Road. I've been here 14 years now. Love it. And I came from Pittsburgh, Cleveland, New Jersey, you name it. Pearl Harbor Day, I was working in a defense factory, Bendix Aviation in Teterboro, New Jersey. And we working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And Pearl Harbor, we had a Sunday afternoon off. I was playing football with the guys and came home, and I was afraid to tell my mother I just broke a tooth. And then I got the bad news that Pearl Harbor was attacked. That was a bad day. So I got tired of working in a defense factory. My cousin enlisted in the Navy in '42. So I decided I want to get out, and I wanted to get in the Navy. I always did like the sea. In fact, at one time I was thinking about joining the Merchant Marine Academy. So I went over to New York City and enlisted, and thinking we will all end up in on the East Coast, Bainbridge, Maryland, or one of those. Well, when it came time to depart, they put us on a train, told us just with our overnight bag, said, we're overloaded on the East Coast, you are headed for the West Coast. So we spent 5 days and 4 nights on an old troop train, steam fired, all over the United States to avoid other trains. Got into San Diego, had my boot camp there, and we were the only Eastern company on the San Diego boot camp. All the rest were Texans or Westerns, and we sort of stood out like a sore thumb. So we managed to survive boot camp, and I was selected for advanced schooling based on our test scores and all that. I was sent to fire control school. So after 6 weeks of that, I got a rating, fire controlman, 3rd class, petty officer. And next thing I know, we were on the train up to Bremerton, Washington, to pick up our ship. It was a Battleship New Mexico. It's an old World War I ship. And she was already underway out of the Puget Sound, and we boarded her while she was still moving and headed out for Los Angeles, I guess it was, to pick up the convoy. And we operated with our sister ship, the Mississippi, which was a World War I, and the Pennsylvania and the Idaho. They're all World War I ships because we all had the same speed problem. We couldn't operate with North Carolina or anything like that, but we had more firepower than them because we had 4 turrets, 14-inch guns. The new ones had 3 16-inch. Anyway, we headed out to Pearl Harbor to get our full convoy and load up with shells. And we were using great big powder bags, you know, and 14-inch shells. And then we went out in some maneuvers to practice for a couple of days, probably near a month, I guess. We didn't see much of Pearl Harbor because we were busy loading the ship, and the only time we got to Pearl Harbor was to load shells aboard ship. And we were actually like 2 and 3 abreast there, you know, and it was a mess. And in fact, when I married my second wife, Jane, she wanted to go to Hawaii. I had no interest in going back to Pearl Harbor after remembering what it was like. But when I got there on the honeymoon, I couldn't believe the difference. I mean, I couldn't even recognize where we were actually tied up. But anyway, we had got our orders and we headed out to the Gilbert Islands. We were going to cover the bombardment of Tarawa and Macon Islands. And so we were out there. First we had about 30 days practice out at sea and all, practicing bombarding and anti-aircraft and all that. So then we pulled up our full convoy and went out to Gilbert Islands. That was in 1943. And we started bombarding, I think. I just looked up some of the information there. On the 20th of November. And we were raking the island from one end to the other with 4 battleships just cruising down, firing 1 turret, 1 and 3, 2 and 4, and so forth, while the others loaded. And it just completely raked the island to pieces. The only trouble is the Japanese all holed up in caves. So they had to send destroyers in point blank trying to get them out of there. But Toraro took the biggest hit, and we were just south of them. And then while we were bombarding the Mississippi, our sister ship had an explosion in our #1 turret, killed 40 people. So next morning we watched them bury 40 people at sea. And then after all that, we started doing some just cruising back and forth to cover everything. And on the 23rd, it was a Wednesday. I know it was a Wednesday because everybody always has beans on Wednesday. And our escort carrier, one of these converted carriers, got hit by 2 torpedoes. In fact, I have the thing there, document. And she went down in 20 minutes, losing 700 people. And so I was just, that was 5 o'clock in the morning, I was just standing on deck looking at it, watching her ready to take off the planes and all. She's about maybe less than a mile from us, right side by side, not even. And we got showered with everything, shoes and beans and parts, and you wouldn't believe it. And she went down in 20 minutes. And we could, as battleship, we couldn't do anything. We just had to keep going because torpedoes were around us, and let the destroyers pick whatever survivors. I think there were 200 survivors left of that. Well, then, after that, we cruised around a while, and then came back to Pearl Harbor and started out on the next mission. And then I was very fortunate. I was selected. I didn't want to go, but they had one opening for officers training. And so I decided, I didn't really, my buddy said he didn't want to take the test alone. It was just 2 or 3 of us that were selected based on our test scores. I went down with him, but he flunked and I got it. So they transferred me to a transport, and I was shipped back to the States and started my officer's training there. And I was very fortunate in that. So I ended up going to Case in Cleveland, getting an engineering degree after the war. Met my first wife there, which was really a blessing. And had 2 wonderful kids with her. We got mustered out on points, and I had points, so I got out a little early, like in beginning of '46. And so I just went right to college. I was already going there to college, so we were going 12 months a year. So I finished, I got an engineering degree in 3 years, a 4-year Bachelor of Science. And then I went to work for U.S. Steel. I worked for them for 38 years. And then my first wife died after 22 years of happy marriage, and I met Jane, and another 38. So. Well, I got choice of discharge or continue as an officer. I never quite made that part. And I said, I'm taking my discharge. So I went to Long Island and got my discharge, and then went right back to school. And I don't think I had 2 days off or something, because it was just overlapping, because we went 12 months a year. And best thing that ever happened as far as I'm concerned. It saved a lot of lives. I have no sympathy whatsoever. I want to hear what Japanese did to some of our people over there. I didn't hear anybody disagree at that point. And Japanese are very hated at that point. I mean, when they talk, people don't realize all of what happened at Guadalcanal and all those marches and what they did to prisoners. And that's why I say I don't want publicity, because there's people much worse off than I went through, and I was lucky. I was very fortunate. So, in fact, my ship got hit real bad right after I left it. The whole bridge got blown off in the Marshall Islands. Art Milliken, you remember him? We were talking one day, found out he was on the sister ship Mississippi, and he operated everywhere we operated. That was right here in the church. And so we had a lot of stories to tell. He remembered the Liscum Bay, and he remembered being 40 guys being buried at sea and all that, because they were right next to us all the time. We always operated as that one unit there. So, but that's the only one. That was a big coincidence. I don't recall ever having a draft number or anything. I think maybe I had some type of deferment because I was working in the defense industry for Bendix Aviation. So I was an aircraft inspector there, so, out of high school. Oh, absolutely. In fact, a little story to that one. My cousin, who had gotten in the Navy ahead of me, went over to New York City with me to show me the way around. So when I took my physical, I passed everything except my pulse was way too fast. So the fellow told me to go out and sit in the lobby for a while and calm down. So my cousin says, "Give me your papers." He says, "I'll go in." So he took my papers and he flunked. So he came back and they said, "Come back in a week." So I had to go back the following week and I was okay. That's how bad we wanted to get in. Yeah, my mother didn't like it, but I came home, told them I wanted to get in the Navy, and she didn't. She was very unhappy about it. My battle station was inside the turret. And you notice I got a hearing aid, and we didn't have any ear plugs or anything like that. And the ones I felt sorry for were the poor seagoing Marines, because we had 20mm guns all over the ship, anywhere, on top of the turrets and all over. And these poor guys were right out in where the flash came back from all those big 14-inch guns. And I admired them. Well, you can say what you want, the Marines, but I admired those guys. They had to go through a heck on, and they had to have inspection on every day, all that junk, and they had a rough captain. My training was on a computer, which was a hand crank thing. You crank in the velocity of this and that, and you turn a crank, and it gives you the direction and all the range and all. But actually, I was a talker on the guns there. So when they were ready, we'd get red lights on the guns, everything was loaded and so forth. And when you had to hit the right horizon, the line, that was our. We didn't have radar or anything like that. Then my daytime station was up in a rangefinder up in the top mast. And the other thing is, on a World War II battleship, we didn't have any bunks. So when I got on board, it was a matter of you strung up your hammock in the mess hall if you wanted to sleep. But that's a big pain, so we didn't do that very much. We just took a blanket and put it on the deck somewhere within the South Pacific, so we'd sleep until our next watch, who was going to relieve us where we were. And so we never used hammocks after that. And only the higher ups got the bunks. We were the East Coast bunch and had that New Jersey, New York accent, and we took a beating from all those Texans and all of Oklahomans and all those on the West Coast. We were stuck out like a sore thumb out there. And, but I don't remember too much about that anymore, but we made it. As I said, I was very fortunate, and I got a college education out of it. So I came out a little better than most. A little thing that we catapulted off the end, and just a one-person plane. And he would do the spotting on one time we were firing, and he had a radio back to hold up because he wasn't high enough. The shells were going across him. And then when they came back, though, the only way they can land is we had to create a 180-degree wake and threw out a net. And they had a little hook on it, and they had to hit that net right away. and then we'd haul them in. And we were underway all the time, so if they missed that net, they were in real trouble. So, but I admired those guys too. They had no armament at all, just one person flying out all over the place. Well, that was the Gilbert Islands there, and that was one of the first islands we invaded, I guess, and Torpedoes took a real bad beating. And we were just south of that, and but we were about a mile offshore when we do that, and we could pick off a tree, you know, in 20 miles really with those. So I was always proud of the accuracy of those 14. I'm a battleship person all the way. I always admired that New Jersey one. Well, send it over to anywhere. Oh yeah, it was a total invasion. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was we wiped the whole island out, and but they got in, and they were still getting hit. So that's when they sent the destroyers, and we didn't see too much of that because we just kept moving. They just flowed us down, and we just raked the island, you know, and one ship after another. And to me, there's nothing like a bombardment by battleships. Man, just those things falling. We just cleared the whole island out. But still, you know, they hop in the caves, and the Marines had to do their job. They sent us back to officers training. They put us in. We were like in our 20s, out of high school for 4 or 5 years. They put us in with all these kids that just had scholarships and all 17-year-olds, you know. And we had a rough time because, I mean, these courses were geared up to these other kids, and we couldn't even remember our math or anything. So I think the pros were a little easy on us, being we had been overseas and whatnot, and we got a little benefit there. When we came back to the States, we had a few that were overseas also, Texans and Oklahomans, you know, and we all palled together. We had a good time because we were all overseas people, and all these other kids, you know, sort of looked up a little bit anyway, and we could do what we wanted to. We were still in the Navy. But we had a chief petty officer who was never overseas, so he was careful what he said. We'd go out, have a good time, and just barely make muster the next morning. But got by. I met my first wife there, so there's some good came out of it. Just so happened, I got an email from somebody who was on the USS Franks, and they just some type of an Easter thing. And they were you there when the Liscum Bay went down? And they had a whole series of things. I thought, gee, that's odd, you know, right now, just when they're talking about this. Because that's one I never heard about. And the first time I heard of, I knew it got hit real hard. But I got a little paper there for our paper. It doesn't say anything on a ship about it. But I went down to Patriots Point, and they had a whole list of all the carriers that got sunk. And I went down there, and I came across Liscum Bay. So one of the most casualties of World War II with any Navy ship. So I went back and pulled it up on the internet, and I knew it the day before Thanksgiving. And I knew it was a Wednesday. And I went back, and sure enough, I pulled up my dates and all that, and it came out that Wednesday. I did remember that. So, but then I pulled up the whole history on it. I was amazed. You know, you didn't hear anything about that. During the war, we never heard anything of that. So, in fact, we didn't even realize how bad it was. So, of course, we just figured, you know, that we left and the destroyers were picking up any survivors. But yeah, that was about the worst moments, I guess. Oh, hey, I'm very patriotic because I've got 3 grandsons. I'm very proud of this. They're in the Air Force. I've got a captain in Air Force Intelligence. Excuse me. I've got a son who's over in Iraq, or a grandson right now in Iraq. He's flying C-130s. He's just called yesterday, telling me he's on his 40th mission. He'll be back in May, hopefully. And I got another one who's just ready to start flying C-17s. And so that's the brother of the one. So I got two sons, or two grandsons who are brothers. One's a captain and one's a lieutenant, and then I got another grandson who's over in Iraq. So I'm real proud of him, and don't say anything to me about it.